we're moving right on to Susie Richmond and Bryan Kortis from Neighborhood Cats. Up your game, email fundraising inside and out. Susie Richmond is the executive director of Neighborhood Cats. She joined the organization after over 20 years running a major New York City shelter and nonprofit veterinary clinic. At Neighborhood Cats, she has led multiple large targeted TNR projects in New York City and northern New Jersey, managed a program for providing scholarships to veterinarians for training in high volume spay neuter of community cats, and co-authored the Humane Society of the United States online course on TNR. In her spare time, she can often be found trapping cats on Maui. And Bryan Kortis, we introduced back Friday night, which seems like ever so long ago, but just like yesterday. And so we have Bryan and Susie joining us today.
Hey, thank you, Stacy.
Thank you, Stacy. Okay, can you hear me okay?
Everything is perfect.
All right, perfect. Okay, well, welcome everybody. So today we're going to go over using email as a way to raise money for your community cat program. Our focus is going to be on taking cats who come to your program with specific needs, and usually those are medical needs, and using them as the basis for email fundraising. So all of us doing this work encounter these cats, probably way more often than we want to. And usually we don't just have the extra funds waiting around for extensive medical care. So we need to go and raise those funds outside our existing budget. So to start off, Bryan's just going to get into some of the nuts and bolts, and then we'll discuss in some more detail the content of a successful email of this type.
Okay, thank you, Susie. So why email for fundraising? And there's a few reasons. Number one, it's very low cost, and sometimes it's no cost, as we'll talk about. It's very accessible. If you have a computer and an internet connection, you're going to be able to do email fundraising. The logistics are quite easy as compared to other ways of fundraising, like organizing an event or doing a direct mail campaign where you're dealing with printers and mail houses. And of course, everybody's got an email address, so your potential audience is quite large. So let's talk a little bit about just the basics of getting an email fundraising program going. So number one, you have to have an email list, right? You're going to do an appeal, but you have to have somebody to appeal to. So you want to not just get anybody, you want to get people who are interested in your work, who are interested in your organization and your programs. Now, you may already have a lot of these email addresses, and you just need to kind of gather them together. But in order to collect them, there's a number of ways to do that. One is through your website with a kind of subscribe field like you see on this slide. You can just put that somewhere on your website. Any events that you do, fundraising or otherwise, you want to be signing people up and getting their email addresses, any kind of trainings. I know Neighborhood Cats, we get a lot of email addresses through workshops that we do. When you're doing direct mail, have a line on your remit form that asks for people's email addresses, and you'll get a lot. Those are the best ones, your donors. And also your clients, so people you're serving. So if you're a shelter, could be all the people who walk in the door. If you're a spay neuter clinic, all the people who are using your services. If you're a TNR group or rescue group, might be your adopters, might be people you're trapping for. Always be thinking, how can I get more email addresses? Now, in order to avoid spam filters and your appeals ending up in junk folders, or getting into trouble because you're violating spam laws, you need to always offer an opt-in or an opt-out. And that is simply at the point where you're collecting the address, there's a checkbox where people can either opt in to get your emails or opt out to not get them. And just a tip, you're going to get a lot more addresses if you have an opt-out option as opposed to an opt-in one. Now, another basic is you're going to need an email program. You don't want to do this on Gmail and BCC hundreds of people. You want to use a professional program. And the other thing, it's just much, much easier than trying to do it yourself. these programs have templates, they have guides, they have all sorts of features that you could never come up with yourself. So the two big ones out there are MailChimp and Constant Contact. And they're both great. Constant Contact, we find, is a little bit simpler. MailChimp has a few more graphic and other features. We use both of them. They're both very straightforward and offer lots of tutorials for beginners. The great thing about MailChimp, if you're starting out, is it's free until you get to 2,000 email addresses, and then they start to charge. And Constant Contact, you can start off at $20 for 500 contacts. Both of them end up, as your list gets larger, their pricing becomes more and more similar. And keep in mind too, in terms of, I want to make one other point I forgot to mention about collecting email addresses, and that's like at Neighborhood Cats, we typically find the giving rate is about 1.5 to 2% of recipients. So that means if we send an email appeal to 1,000 recipients, we'll expect to get 15 to 20 gifts back. So obviously the larger your list, the more money you're going to be able to raise. Okay, so let's get into the actual content of the email appeal. And Susie, do you want to talk about what the guiding principle is in these appeals?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you guys take away one thing from today's presentation, make it this one. Please remember that you need to build an emotional connection to the cat you're raising funds for. So for most people, not everyone, but for most people, giving is not a logical process. You can lay out a plan, but it's not a logical thing. People give because they have an impulse that they want to help. So if you think about the times that you've made donations, what is it that you're feeling when you read about an animal or you hear about an animal and then you go ahead and you click that donate button? It's because you're like, oh my gosh, Muffin is in trouble here and I want to help. It's that feeling that we need to instill in our readers. And we get there by making the cat come alive to them, making them feel like they know her, so that when she's sick or when she's hurt, that her distress matters to them, and that by giving them, they're making a difference. And we tell them you can make a difference by getting Misty into surgery. And if you give a donation, if you support us, that's what's going to happen. So that's really the basis. We have to make that all important emotional connection.
Okay, so let's break down, Susie, how you make that connection. Okay. And so first, I get everybody out there, just take a moment to read both of these blurbs quickly, and then we'll go over them. Okay, so the blurb on the left is what we would call a data-driven appeal, and the blurb on the right is a more emotional narrative type of appeal. So Susie, let me ask, which approach is more likely to build that emotional connection that you just mentioned?
Okay, so well, if you take a look for a second at the data approach on the left, it's an impressive list of accomplishments, and it's what a lot of groups actually use in their email fundraising efforts. And that's because they're proud of the work that they're doing, and rightfully so. And they believe that they should be rewarded for doing that work. The trouble is, when it comes to fundraising, it doesn't usually work. It's just too dry. And for most of us, lists of numbers and how many tons of cat food doesn't evoke an emotional response. It doesn't get you kind of all teary-eyed and like, oh my gosh. So by contrast, the paragraph on the right, which is the opening to an appeal that we did do, introduces you to the cat. It provokes an emotional response. You feel like you're right there, and this is somebody in front of you who needs help, and wow, I can help. So data is got an important function, but not for a fundraising appeal.
So when would you use data?
So it's very, very important for donor cultivation, and that means for building your credibility with your followers. So when it comes time to make that emotional appeal, they have read about the things that you're doing or heard about the things that you're doing, and they have positive feelings for you. Because you don't want every communication with your donors to be about money. Sometimes you should just be giving out information about your programs and your achievements, things like donor updates, or newsletters, or parts of a longer campaign, such as Giving Tuesday has become an important part of all our lives. And leading up to that, you can share this kind of information, and people might not remember later on that, okay, gee, they TNR'd 995 cats and placed 72 more, but they will have it in their heads that, gee, these guys stepped up and they helped a lot of cats, and all sorts of them went back to their colonies and went into homes, and they'll have a good impression of that, and that will come into play when you do turn to them with a critical situation.
Okay, so you specifically mentioned that you're trying to make an emotional connection to one cat. So why one, as opposed to, this litter of very cute kittens here on the left? Why one versus many? Yeah,
okay, this is a lesson that we learned the hard way. So as everyone sees, we've got some litter of 6 little cuties there. So these kittens were left in a dumpster outside a supermarket, and they were very little. And the person who called us said they heard the kittens crying in the dumpster. They couldn't get to them. They couldn't stay on site. And the problem that we had, the acute problem, was that these kittens were, it was 11 a.m. when the call came, and there was a trash pickup scheduled for noon. So if we couldn't get to them, they were at risk of being compacted. Pretty horrible. So we thought, wow, 6 kittens in distress, that's 6 times the wallop. This is going to be a surefire appeal, because they were sick when we got them. They needed a lot of care. The trouble was the appeal bombed, and we were pretty surprised by that. But when we thought about it, we realized, well, it's because we were asking people to make 6 personal connections. And that's not to say that they didn't care about the kittens. We know that everybody did, but it's a lot harder to make just that strong one-on-one bond when it's not one. So we didn't do that again. On the right, you see another of our appeals. This is a kitty named Ralphie. He's obviously in a lot of distress there. And when he actually was suffering from, we get a lot of dental cats. If you're anything like us, you do too. And he had horrible, horrible dental disease. It was so severe that the disease had eaten a hole through the roof of his mouth into his sinuses. So hair and everything was drifting up into his passages. It was terrible. But we focused on his story, and we told the story, and it went great. People cared about Ralphie, and and they donated, and they provided the life-saving surgery, and he went on to do great.
Okay,
so,
great. So
one, not multiple.
How about the next factor, which is urgency versus a situation that's urgent versus one that's resolved, and kind of get into that. Can you kind of quickly tell us the story of this kitty whose name is Grayson?
Yeah, okay, yeah, this is Grayson. And so Grayson is a cat who, years ago, when he was a young cat, he was found by a family in the Bronx on a sidewalk, and they took him home. They kept him as their cat, and he lived with them happily for several years. I think it was 8 years that they had him, but eventually they moved away. And when they left, the day they left, they took Grayson back to the spot on the sidewalk where they found him, and they left him there, and they left. So he's a great cat. He is not a streetwise cat. He was not doing well out there. He was, clearly suffering when a local caretaker came along and, saw that he was failing, and she called neighborhood cats. So we stepped in. We, brought him to the vet. He had lost a ton of weight. He had, once again, horrible dental disease. We provided the treatment he needed, and on the right there, you see Grayson about 6 weeks later. After he's had treatment and is feeling lots better.
And he's in his new home in that photo, right?
Yes. Yeah, that was a couple of days after he arrived. He made himself right at home.
Yeah, which was about, I guess, 6 weeks after the point in which we first learned about him. So at what point in this process did we, Neighborhood Cat, send out an appeal to cover his medical costs, and why?
Okay, so some groups think mistakenly that you need to wait until there's a happy ending before raising the funds based on a given cat story. And it's understandable. You want to say, hey, look how great that everything is going. But you'll actually find that the best time to ask for help is when the cat still needs help. Urgency may be the most powerful motivator in this kind of appeal. People want to feel like they're part of the rescue effort and that their contribution is what's going to bring about that happy ending. And in fact, that is true. Without those contributions, we can't make this care happen. So it's a very powerful motivator.
And you can save those happy endings for an update, right? Because once you've gotten people emotionally connected to the cat and giving to make sure that he's okay, they want to know how it turned out. They want to have an update. So that photo on the right can be used to inform your donors. Now, that's not going to be raising a lot of money for you. A little bit. People will give you a little bit of money for a job well done, but it's mostly to cultivate the next appeal that you do for a cat in need. So
yeah, I'd underscore that. I would just, say to people, you've asked them to get emotionally involved. They've stepped up. And so to not let them know how things are turning out, you're going to have some unhappy people, and it's the right thing to do. They care. You should give them that update.
Okay, so let's move on to the next factor in terms of making an appeal have that emotional connection to the one cat. And again, I'm going to ask everybody just to take a moment and read through the two blurbs that you see here, and we'll talk about them. Okay, so the style of writing on the left is what could be called journalistic, sort of just the facts, please. Whereas the style on the right is much more descriptive and narrative. In fact, the blurb on the right is expanding on the first sentence in the blurb on the left. And so Susie, I guess, let me ask you, I guess the answers can be obvious, but which one is better for an email appeal?
Okay, well, clearly the one on the right is going to lend itself a lot better for this purpose. The one on the left kind of reads like a police report. It's just, what happened, bing, bang, boom. And that's informative, but it's not very emotional at all. The one on the right gives a lot more detail that's going to just draw the reader right in. So this is not just any kitten now. He's got a name. His name is Moonlight. The kind person who found him is not some faceless woman. She's Sophie. We know what the kitten looks like. He's little enough to fit in her hand. He's black. You can picture him sitting in her palm. And, you can even see a little bit of his personality. He's meowing for help. He's not huddled, silent. He's a little bit of a talker. So there's a lot of information that's conveyed in just fleshing it out a little bit.
Okay, great. Also, I'd point out that the journalistic one blurb it lacks urgency. So, the situation's resolved. Whereas on the right, the descriptive one, hopefully this appeal is going out before everything has been taken care of. So just to summarize in terms of the written content of one of these email appeals, your best content is going to be a story. It's going to be about one cat. That cat's going to have an urgent need, and the appeal is going to be written in a descriptive manner. So let's move on to the other equally important element of these appeals, and that's the visuals. And what you're seeing here is a photo of the top of an email appeal that we just sent out about this kitty Patches. And because the photo is so important, we place it at the top of the email. It's the first impression people get when they open it. We prefer photos that stretch the width of the entire email, so that's usually 600 pixels. And the key thing here is you want to integrate the photo into the written content so that people are reading what they're seeing, and the two are reinforcing each other. So let's break this down a little bit about what makes for a good photo. Susie, you want to take this one?
Sure. Okay, so we have a few tips there listed on the left. So, first of all, we want to keep the focus on Kitty's face if we can. If the injury or the problem is on the face, or actually, if it's visible and can clearly be shown, then try to include that. eye contact is a big one that's really important. It's the cat's best way of making his or her own case. You know, the cat looking right at you is sort of the cat speaking to the viewer. It's much more powerful than kitty looking up to the side or down at the floor or whatever. The cat hurting versus healthy, you know, that ties into urgent versus resolved. So if the cat is clearly in distress, that's going to speak volumes. Give a sense who the cat is, you know, if you can. You know, is he, some of them are real extroverts, some of them, you know, you can just get, some of them are big teddy bears. If you can convey that at all, it's helpful. It also just, the photos can give a lot of information. So here, this cat's face is, she's drooling. You know, she had, surprise, surprise, terrible dental disease, so she couldn't groom anymore. So you can see she's gotten matted because of that, and it's right there. And she's drooling pus. It was so awful. It's right there. So the photo can carry a lot of information.
Okay, great.
Like this little girl.
Yeah, let's move on to this. This is another example. This is a kitty, Mickey, and you can see this shares the attributes that Susie was just mentioning. The kitty, as best he can, is making eye contact. He was suffering from entropion, which is a condition where the eyelashes grow inwards and poke the eye, and you can see that, and it's going to be mentioned, of course, in the story. And you have a sense of who he is, you know, this kind of big teddy bear-like tomcat. Here's another example of a photo we used. Now, this one, there's no obvious injury, but again, focus on the face, excellent eye contact, and the photo does convey, even though it doesn't convey the specific injury, that this kitty is elderly, frail, very sweet, very vulnerable. In fact, she did have bad dental disease and also a mass on her neck, but it wasn't necessary to show that because of the other, her vulnerability that you can see. So Susie, let's talk a little bit about what we call moment of truth photos, and we need to move this along just a little bit faster.
Okay. Okay, so this is Chumley. He's a kitty who was again, you know, in pretty dire shape. But a moment of truth photo are ones that basically capture the cat at the time they were discovered or rescued. And because it's so real and so immediate, they're very dramatic, and so they can be very, very powerful. Chumley was collapsed basically by the side of the road. It was a bitterly cold day. He was in pain. You can even see how pale his little tongue is. He was anemic. And people were just going by, and then a young lady, a college student, actually stopped and could not walk away. She took his picture, contacted us, and this is Chumley's moment of truth. And it is okay with these to sacrifice a little bit of technical quality just because they inherently are so powerful, these photos. So, you know, if it's a bad photo, you know, don't go with it if the viewer has to struggle. But if it's a little bit less clear, or the lighting's not, you know, maybe all you would wish, as long as the cat still comes through and you can see just what you're looking at, a moment of truth photo can be a really great choice.
So let's show, here's another moment of truth photo. Can you really just very briefly tell us what this is depicting?
This is a older kitty named Jules. She had been hit by a car, is our best guess, some days before this happened. And if you look, you can see this is the moment she walked up to somebody on the sidewalk, and she was just standing in front of people asking for help, and somebody took her picture. You can see her jaws just shattered there. And this is the moment that she found the person who said, yes, I'm going to help you.
Yeah, so, you know, a lot of rules go out the window if you have this moment of truth photo. In our experience, these are the most powerful ones. The ones we showed you before, you know, the focus on the face, eye contact, those work quite well, but there's nothing quite like the moment of truth. And so this photo is a little fuzzy, it's not quite the right angle, but it's so dramatic. So when one of the tips from this is when people bring you these cats, always ask them, did you take a photo? People take photos of everything these days. Did you take a little video that you can pull a still from? Anything that will show that moment is going to create a very powerful connection to your readers.
And just super quick, because we've asked everybody to get invested, and I bet you want to know what happened. So Jewel was wired, her jaw was wired for 2 months. She's got kind of a crooked smile now, but she did fine. She's doing great.
Yeah, she ended up quite well. So just want to quickly go over a few. Those are the two main things, the written content and the photo. Here's a few other not ideas, but kind of things you want to have in your email. So you need to have obviously a donate button. And you can see what we like to do is turn it into a call for action, like save Frosty, who's this kitty, as opposed to just give or donate. But that's just your own choice. You want to make sure that underneath the donate button, you have a statement that says something like this, but basically the idea is that any funds you raise in excess of this particular cat's expenses will go towards helping other cats in need. So if you just need $2,000 and you end up raising $3,000, including this statement at the bottom will allow you to use that $1,000 for another kitty. Sometimes we also include, as you can see, a small photo or even a GIF right above the donate button if we feel like that is going to add something to the appeal. Don't put it there just to put it there, but if it adds something, it can be helpful. Subject lines are real important. You can have the greatest appeal in the world, but it won't do much good if nobody opens your email. So we're looking at that third email down from Neighborhood Cats, where it's abandoned, alone, Patches needs us now. So let's take a look at what makes that a good subject line. And good subject line is going to need to have these elements. It needs to be informative, it needs to be emotional, it needs to have a call to action, and it also needs to be succinct. So you can see in this one, abandoned, alone, there's a lot of information there. We know the kitty was dumped. We know Patches is a cat because it's from Neighborhood Cats. There's a call to action like we need you to take to help this kitty. So in those 6 words, there's a lot of information. And why just 6 words? Well, because of this, because people look at emails on their mobile phones and they don't have much room, as you can see on the right there. Again, the second email down is the same one. If that was a long sentence, if that was 12 words instead of 6, a lot of viewers would only see the first half of it and you wouldn't be getting your message across. So a couple of other tips is to use the preview text. That's the line right underneath the subject line. You can use that to add more information. And again, you're trying to get people to open the email. Don't use space for stuff that's obvious, like we know that Patches is a cat, so we don't need to say that. And avoid things that will get your email in somebody's spam folder. So don't use all caps, don't use lots of emojis, never use $signs, don't use lots of exclamation points. Don't make it an obvious sales pitch or you're just going to end up in the junk folder. So the last point we want to make is about conversion, and that's that where somebody goes after they click your donate button in the email matters, and that's because it's not automatic that somebody clicks the donate button in the email and then they're going to give a gift. Your job isn't complete until they filled out this form with their credit card information or PayPal information, and then they hit donate. And not everybody who clicks on the donate button in the email is going to convert, is going to go to the donate page and then actually follow through. So you need your donate page to keep working. You need it to keep telling the story. Now the donate page on the left there continues to show photos, it adds text, it's another call for action. The donate page on the right is just your generic PayPal and it doesn't do any of that. So if you do this properly, you're gonna convert a lot more gifts with the program on the left. So just to let you know what those are, this is what's out there. The donate page on the left that you just saw, that was built with Classy. So that's your more expensive donor management platform that lets you build your own donation pages and thank you pages. We find it's a great investment, and the return on investment is far, far greater than the expense. But if you want to start out without paying anything up front, you can use Fundraise Up, which is also an excellent program. It has different kinds of donate pages. They're smaller, but you can still add a photo, you can still add text, and they don't charge any monthly fees. They do have higher transaction costs, but they're often covered by the donors. And then Donor Perfect and Network for Good are also kind of popular programs that are worth checking out. So we've talked about the different elements, the photo, the written content, the subject line, the donate button, what little things to add. If you want to see all of this in one complete email, then click on this link when download the slides for the conference. And if you click on this link, it will take you to the full appeal. So that's a lot in a little bit of time. If you have questions, feel free to write to either Susie or myself. And Susie, is there anything else you want to add as we close?
No, I think we're good. Just, thank you so much, everybody, for helping these cats. And, again, feel free to reach out to us with any questions.
And in the interest of time, there are a couple of questions out there. There's one question I do want to ask, so I am going to do that. And then the rest of the questions we'll share with you virtually. But one question was, you're sharing these photos of these cats that are outside and that they've, hit on hard times. Do you get any criticism from anti-TNR folks showing these compromised cats for fundraising?
You want to take that, Susie?
Well, it actually just, all I can say is that it hasn't really been an issue for us. I don't recall that kind of pushback.
Yeah, I recall a couple of times where people were like, I hope you're not going to put the cat back outside, right? And then we may have to explain to them, well, if the kitty's friendly and wasn't doing well, then of course we're not going to put the kitty outside. But if the kitty is quite feral and unadoptable and would be miserable indoors and has a good caretaker, we'll explain that and explain why we're going to put the cat back. But again, our audience is built on people who know TNR, who understand TNR, who've been educated about it. So yeah, it's not that often we get that kind of pushback. If you're concerned about that, then maybe you need to do a bit of an educational campaign before you launch these kinds of appeals, or stick to kitties that are definitely going to adoptive homes.
And it isn't a story that's going on the front page of the newspaper or something like that, where I know in my past, I've had stories about a kitty that needed extra medical care that made like back when we had local papers, and people would be like, oh, why are you spending $10,000 on a cat when there are, hungry people down the street or whatever? And so, we'd have to sort of mitigate that type of a situation. But this is your own email list. This is your own tribe. So you really shouldn't get that much of a pushback on your own donor list.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's great. So thank you very much for that. In the interest of staying on schedule, which we're a little bit behind schedule, but great information. We're going to